Howdy everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm so excited to be showing you this year's Holo royalty collection called Disco Cowboy. If you don't know, Holo Taco has a loyalty program where the highest tier is called Holo Royalty, and one of their perks is getting to sort of participate in some surveys to kind of create their own collection that releases every April. I believe this is the third year we're getting a Holo royalty collection, and as with the previous ones, these shades are going to be limited edition and they will be excluded from the loyalty sale that's happening this weekend as well. And speaking of those things too, I also forgot to mention I have Born Ugly, which was the limited edition shade released for April Fools. Though you may have already seen me kind of swatch and compare it already in a short video, I still will have a few more comparisons in this video as well. So as always, I will save more of my thoughts for the end. For now, let's just get into the swatches. Just kidding. First, we of course have to look at the gorgeous packaging that this collection comes in. I'm really a fan of these like smaller boxes because they're just so much more compact than the previous collection boxes while still being so beautifully designed. The same goes for the unicartons that the polishes come in. They have that same orange, pink, and purple kind of gradient with these little cowboy motifs. We have some disco balls, and obviously everything is holographic. Now getting into the polishes, the first shade we have is Moonlit Rodeo, and this one is described as a purple jelly with cyan, micro shimmer, and scattered holo. I personally wouldn't call this like a jelly-based polish. As you can see, it has incredible coverage here on the first coat where it's very pigmented. It is just like a little bit sheer, which is very much in line with a lot of other shimmer polishes. And since this one is a little bit on the darker side, I found it perfectly opaque for me in just 2 coats alone. The formula was still super smooth and buttery. I think it was a little bit pearlescent maybe, so you might want to be careful with your brush strokes just to avoid them being a little wonky. Here in more extreme lighting, you can hopefully see that there's a subtle shift to purple, which was really pretty. And here is the full hand swatch worn in 2 coats and with a glossy top coat. So again, even in direct sunlight, this has very great coverage where I could barely see any visible nail line. And in lower lighting, it has this sort of soft kind of internal glow. Next up we have Disco Inferno, which is a hot orange frosted metal with a gold scattered holo. I was so excited to see this one because I really love orange polishes. I know they're not always the most popular, but I think this one is super beautiful. It has an amazing formula with really great coverage on the first coat. It is just a little tiny bit sheer, but like the last shade, I found that I only needed 2 coats to get this fully opaque for me on my nail length. As I mentioned, this is described as like a hot sort of orange, so it definitely is very warm, but not too red at all. Though I will say it does feel very autumnal to me, which I definitely really like. And the sparkle is so beautiful. As you saw, there are some really large foily metallic kind of pieces in here that catch the light so beautifully in direct sunlight, and you can see a little bit of that holo sparkle, and then in lower lighting you can see those individual flakies. The next shade we have is Sparkling Spurs, and this one is a warm lilac crushed holo. No surprise, I really love this one. I'm a big fan of the crushed holo formula, even though I know a lot of people don't really like it because it admittedly isn't the most holographic, especially when compared to a linear holo from Holo Taco, but it does still provide a really pretty scattered holo effect that's just a little bit more subtle. The formula on this was such a dream. I thought it looked really great on the first coat. It kind of leans a little bit more pink because it's a bit more sheer, but obviously once you do the second coat, you get a little bit more of that purple color coming through. I feel like this is one of those shades that kind of toes the line between pink and purple, and I usually don't like those, but I really, really love this one. So as you saw, I showed it under flash so you can see more of that holo sparkle, and here it is in direct sunlight and a little out of focus just because it's a little easier to catch the twinkly rainbow, and in lower lighting you do lose that rainbow effect, but it does still look really sparkly in like an icy kind of way. The next shade is Cowboy Tears, and this is a turquoise crushed holo with a pink purple micro shimmer. This is another one that I absolutely loved, way more than I was expecting to. The formula, as you saw, was just incredible. It was so pigmented and so full coverage. I don't think I would go as far as calling it a one coater exactly, but you know, it's perfectly opaque in two. Maybe you could wear it in one coat if your nails are super short and you're in a pinch, because I feel like all the shimmer and the crushed holo effect just will kind of distract from any visible nail line. The shimmer in this one is a little bit on the subtle side. It's not as glowy as other kind of shimmer polishes, for example, but I think it did stand out nicely against the turquoise blue sort of base. It's like just a really nice contrast in my opinion, but I did wish it stood out a little bit more even in lower lighting, especially since you lose the holo. And rounding out the collection, we have Bless Your Heart, which is a berry pink holographic glitter. As a certified pink lover, I was so excited for this one. Even though at first I actually wasn't sure if this had the same formula as like the OG glitters, because to me, I feel like this just looked more heavy on like the very tiny micro glitters. I remembered the OG glitters just being more like varied with the glitter sizes, but either way, this one had a nice formula. I mean, as you saw on the first coat, it was very densely packed with the glitters. It had a little bit more of a jelly leaning base color, and I got it pretty opaque here on two coats, though I think if you look close enough, you might be able to see some bald spots, but the formula wasn't too difficult to work with, though I can see it thickening up over time. So even though it did look pretty great during the live swatch, I feel like here in direct sunlight on my full hand swatch, it just looked a little, maybe not patchy, but maybe like there's some bald spots peeking through. So you could always just sponge on another layer if you don't want to paint another layer and deal with the thicker sort of formula. And here's a collage of my full hand swatches, again worn in two coats each with top coat. I would say that the only one that maybe needs a glitter grabber sort of top coat is Bless Your Heart, because it has that chunky kind of glitter formula, but the others don't really need that. And again, I think these have really great coverage on just two coats where I couldn't see any nail line. And lastly, here is Born Ugly, which was the limited edition shade released for April Fools. This is described as a drab brown green, and I guess I would say that is pretty accurate. I would just kind of call it like a camo green, but it is very like muted with a little bit of a brownish undertone. This one had a flawless one coat formula. Now getting into comparisons, I want to start with some bottle shots for Moonlit Rodeo, just to kind of show you like, you know, for color reference. So here it is next to Don't Be Jelly and Made Me Ink from the Off the Deep End collection. Both of those are much more vibrant. Then here it is next to Electric Sweetener, which is the crushed holo from the Rock Candy collection, and the Price is Alexandrite from the Birthstone collection. They're both technically purple bases with like blue shimmers, but I think Electric Sweetener is a little closer because it's not as multi-chromatic as Alexandrite is, but that one's still a lot brighter. So then I also wanted to show this next to Shadow Lake and Phantom Call from the Underglow collection last winter, because those have like that dark shimmer kind of vibe that I think Moonlit Rodeo has. Shadow Lake is a little too blue. Phantom Call is definitely closer, having that like deep moody purple base, but that one has this bright coppery golden shimmer. So maybe in extreme angles of light, the base color kind of looks similar, but I would not call any of these dupes. I think maybe the closest holo taco is Cool Cat Mom, even though that one has like the inverse color scheme where it has a blue base and a purpley pink shimmer. Not to mention that is a magnetic, but I'm showing it unmagnetized and it looks, you know, kind of like a shimmer polish. Maybe in certain angles I can see these looking a little similar, but I again would not call them dupes. For some other purple bases with blue shimmers in my collection, I immediately thought of ILNP's Drive-In and Mooncat's Glory of Innocence. Drive-In technically has more of a greenish shimmer that kind of shifts to blue, so the shimmer color in Mooncat I would say is closer to Moonlit Rodeo, but it's a little bit more glowy, and the base is also a lighter lavender color, and it also is like a linear holo, so definitely not a dupe. And here's Moonlit Rodeo next to Mooncat's Siren's Deceit and Bermuda Triangle, which sadly has been retired. I thought these were going to be a little bit closer, like they kind of are when it comes to the tone of purple, but again, Moonlit Rodeo is just a little bit deeper. The shimmer in Siren's Deceit is more of a darker blue, and Bermuda Triangle has flaky, so again, these are not dupes. I would say the closest shade in my collection to Moonlit Rodeo was KBShimmer's Fla-vor-ite color, which I think is retired. I feel like KBShimmer doesn't retire polishes often, but I couldn't find this one on the website anymore. But either way, this one's still a little too bright, so it's not an exact dupe. Next for Disco Inferno, I of course have to show this next to Orange Drink and Zyler the Cat, two absolutely beautiful oranges from Holo Taco, and I feel like they almost look yellow leaning compared to Disco Inferno, but I would say that those two are true oranges. Again, Disco Inferno is just really warm, so I figured it's closer in color to I'm Rover-ite, which does have a more kind of shimmery metallic kind of finish, so you know, it's a little different in that way as well. But I think the closest to a potential dupe in my collection was ILNP's Carved. That sort of has like a large shimmer particle, which in my opinion could also be considered like a micro flaky finish. So on the nail, they look really close. I would say that Carved is just a little bit brighter. It's also obviously missing those larger foily metallic kind of flakies, but in most lighting, I feel like they can kind of blend in with each other. Moving on to Sparkling Spurs, I knew I had to show this next to Glamethyst, which was from the first royalty collection, as well as Menchie the Cat, which is one of the OG glitter polishes. Both Glamethyst and Menchie the Cat have that same like varied size hex glitter formula, so it's obviously going to look very different compared to the crushed holographic, but even color-wise, Glamethyst is more of an icy lavender, while Menchie is an icy pink. Sparkling Spurs is kind of in the middle, but it's also more vibrant. And here is Sparkling Spurs next to Crystal Mommy, which is another purple crushed holographic, but that one is a bit cooler toned, much deeper, and it also has this like more vibrant pink kind of shimmer. So I would also say these are pretty far from dupes. Here it is next to a couple of Mooncat purples. First I have Shattered Glass on the left, which is a purple linear holo, and then Serpent's Tongue on the right, which is a purple micro glitter. That one is actually really close to Glamethyst, so maybe it's not super helpful to kind of see it twice here, but I thought that maybe one of these would be a little closer in color, but they're both a little too cool toned. And lastly, I have a couple of ILNP comparisons. First, I pulled out Sugar Cube, which is more of like an icy, shimmery type of finish. But again, that one's a little too cool toned, more of like a bluish lavender color. So because Sparkling Spurs was leaning a little bit more pink, I thought maybe it would be closer in color to Frosted Rose from the Eternal collection. And it kind of is, but it's not as vibrant. Moving on to Cowboy Tears, I wanted to see this next to Happily Ever Aqua, which is another birthstone polish, and Spyglass, which is another light blue crushed holo with a shimmer, but that one is a little bit too powdery blue, like more of a cornflower sort of color. I think the base color in Happily Ever Aqua is a little bit more similar to Cowboy Tears, but that one's just like way more aqua, so basically they're not dupes. So I thought maybe for something a little bit more mid-toned, I can show it next to Hydropower and Never Tied Down. Again, this is more for color reference because Hydropower is a linear holographic and Never Tied Down is a flaky kind of polish. Never Tied Down is just a bit too dark and like teal leaning. I would say that Hydropower is like kind of close, but that also has this drop of turquoise maybe. I know Cowboy Tears is described as a turquoise, but I think that one just leans a little bit more blue. Some other shades of blue that I thought were kind of close included ILNP's Aria, which is a linear holo, but I feel like that still had a little bit of that turquoisey color. But then I thought of Rogue's Sense and Sensibility, which I think has a pretty close like base color to Holo Taco, but unfortunately the Rogue is a chrome shimmer, which is just very overpowering, so it's just kind of hard to tell. Cowboy Tears kind of reminded me of Mooncat's Melting Clocks or Earth to Gaia, even though those are shimmer polishes, so they're like a different finish, but even color-wise, those two are just way too light to compare to Cowboy Tears. And lastly, Cowboy Tears reminded me of these two Cirque shades, the first one being Tipsy Turvy, which I think is probably the closest, at least when it comes to the base color, but the Cirque is more of like a jelly finish, so it's a little bit more sheer, and it has a slightly more orangey shimmer instead of pink, and Cerillos is more of like a true turquoise linear hollow, so that one's not really that close. And lastly, for Bless Your Heart, I do have a lot of just bottle comparisons, but I did want to start by showing this side by side with Birthday Brat, which was the hot pink foil metallic from the Birthstone collection, as well as next to Naughty List, which is just a red. There's no pink in that one at all, but it's just one of the OG glitters, so it's more of like comparing the formula. So I'm wearing 2 coats of each here, and while it does look like they do have that same micro glitter type of mix, Bless Your Heart just has a more jelly or at least a more sheer kind of base. Color-wise, it's close to Birthday Brat, but not as dark. For some other quick bottle comparisons to other Holo Taco pinks, here I have What a Catch from the Off the Deep End collection. That one's definitely a lot brighter, closer to a hot pink than a berry pink. Pop Rocker, which is a crushed holo, is also much lighter, almost like a bubblegum pink kind of color. I was also immediately reminded of Bury Me in Holo, which even though that's a crushed holo finish, I just thought the berry color would be kind of close, but if it isn't obvious, that one is more berry leaning, like a little bit more reddish or maybe more muted too in color, while Rage Bait is much brighter, more similar to What a Catch. Then I knew these weren't going to be close, but I just figured, you know, for color reference, here it is next to Private Villa and Life in Plastic. Both of those are much brighter shades of pink. Private Villa is even bordering on red. I think I destashed my bottle of Hotwire Pink, so I figured I could show it next to Mooncat's Venus Flytrap, which is another like hot pink linear holo. It is a little bit darker though. And Mooncat's My Sandy Claus outfit, which is more of a micro glitter kind of finish, but that one leans a little bit more red. And lastly, for Born Ugly, here it is next to a couple of Holo Taco dark greens like Headhunter on the left and Modest Moss on the right. Born Ugly is kind of like in between these two shades, but it's also a lot more muted at the same time, so it's definitely very unique. And here it is next to Holo Taco's Not Pressed, which is a lot lighter and more yellow leaning. The same could be said for Cracked Polish's Sunlit Moss, which is not as light or yellow as Not Pressed, but it's still more olivey in color than Born Ugly is. I figured I could show this one again next to Mooncat's The Stranger and Olive Ave's Olive, both of which are more olivey greens. I'm not sure how well you can tell in this lighting, but The Stranger is definitely the lightest of the three and the most yellow leaning, so it's like a very true olive kind of color. Olive Ave's Olive is also olive colored, but it is a little bit darker, but still missing that brownish undertone that Born Ugly has. And lastly, here it is next to ILNP's Treetop from the Campground collection last fall, and NCLA's Camo is the New Black, which sadly is not around anymore. The only one of these that I haven't compared to Born Ugly is Treetop, which I had left out initially because I just thought it was way too light. And don't get me wrong, it definitely is very light compared to Born Ugly, but it does kind of have a similar like muted quality to it, similar to NCLA, but that one is also just too dark. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons of Holo Taco's Disco Cowboy collection and Born Ugly. So as always, I would love to know your thoughts on these releases. Starting with Born Ugly, I actually really loved it. As soon as I saw it, I was like, wait, this is a beautiful camo kind of green, and I had to pick it up immediately. I'm sure many of you know, I'm not the biggest like prugly lover by any means, but I genuinely don't think that green is like prugly. I feel like it's so beautiful and perfect for fall. And obviously I know a lot of other people feel that way too, but for any other people who are like not prugly lovers, you know, similar to me, I would love to know what you think of this shade, if it is actually like too ugly for you, because I kind of need to figure out like if I am turning into a prugly lover, you know? And when it comes to the Disco Cowboy collection, I actually really liked it. I thought it was really pretty, just so fun and sparkly. The theme is definitely very unexpected, you know, not my usual interest by any means, but I thought it was like so fun and just like well curated. The polishes themselves obviously are fantastic quality. It's just, you know, what you expect from Holo Taco at this point. I'm sure there are going to be people that are upset that we have 2 crushed holos in this collection, but I see it as like, you know, just trying to cater to both groups of people who love crushed holos, but they don't love the shimmers in them. Overall, I am like a big fan of the color palette, the finishes, the formulas. They were all really beautiful. I do feel like a little bit, I don't know, upset or bad just sounds like too extreme, but I was, you know, perusing the subreddit as I do, and I came across a couple of people talking about how they weren't really loving this collection, specifically Holo Royalty, because they felt that they didn't have like as much involvement with creating this collection, and it just kind of seemed like Holo Taco already had an idea of what they wanted for the collection, and so the surveys just felt more like, oh, here are your options, so kind of pick between them. So that is kind of a bummer to hear, because obviously, you know, for previous years, Holo Royalty is able to sort of provide a little bit more input through the surveys, but even with those previous collections, I know they can also be very divisive because, you know, not everybody is going to agree on everything, and you're always going to see a lot more people skewing towards like picking a purple, but it can feel overdone. And, you know, there are some people who are like, no, please, can we just do like a green instead? But that's like the unpopular opinion, so, you know, it's not going to get as many votes. So it just kind of sucks overall, because I feel like no matter what, I don't want to say it's like a lose-lose and sound super negative that way, but I just really feel for Holo Royalty and Holo Taco trying to, you know, do something fun, but just not being able to manage everybody's like wants and opinions. I would love to know, especially from people who are in Holo Royalty, what you thought of this collection. If, you know, you felt heard, if they already gave a theme, would you have gone with different colors? Because again, I have not really seen like the surveys or anything, so I'm not sure if they just gave options between, oh, pick between these 2 shades of blue, and then, you know, we were just gonna get a blue regardless. Assuming you're allowed to like share this information, right? I would love to know what you would have done differently. Of course, I'd love to hear from you too if you are not part of Holo Royalty. And either way, let me know if you're gonna be shopping the sale this weekend, or just let me know any and all thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.